Salve a tutti, sono Marduk e benvenuti in un nuovo video. Oggi siamo qui per fare un'intervista a Swanö, famoso per essere stato membro di band come Age of Sanity, Unicorn, Bloodbath, Nightingale, per essere stato anche membro nonché produttore dei Katatonia e anche in ambito black metal per essere stato produttore di gruppi come Marduk, Dissection e Abruptum. Prima di iniziare lo ringrazio per la sua disponibilità, per aver accettato di essere nostro ospite, vi lascio l'intervista e vi auguro buona visione.
Why did I start making music? Well, I had no choice really. I grew up in a household where I think everyone really could play to a certain extent. My father played guitar and he used to play guitar with my brother dog. I think he learned maybe his first chords from his father. And my mother, I knew she could play, but she didn't really play. But she insisted that we bought a piano at a certain point, and for that I am eternally grateful. I never heard her play it though, but there was always a piano in the home when she grew up, so I guess she could twinkle the ivories a little bit. Yeah, but it really came then with my 10-year-old brother Dog and my 16-year-old brother Ingjald. They were music nerds. And of course, at one point, Dog started playing in bands and they were often rehearsing in our garage or in our living room. And there was always, everything was about music. And my world was a little bit about sports and also about music. And Ingjald, my oldest brother, he was really much about listening to music, not as much as writing or performing, but he was also really much into sport, being a very good goalie in both handball, whatever you call it, and football, of course, making me also want to be. I was actually also a goalie for a long time in football and had kind of a dual thing there with drumming and being a goalie. The first thing we did really that I can remember, so there are recordings of me and my brother having some kind of duo. It's on one of those on the Metal Collection CD that you can buy from the Swanö merch thing. There's the opening track, it's called Time to Die, which is me when I was 5 or 6 or something, singing in make-believe English. And this is the first known recording of me and Dog, and it's really funny. And then we had the Forge only, I think, a band with Ingjald on bass, Dog on drums and vocals, and me on organ and vocals. And I was also very young there, 6 years old or 7 or something like that. And after that, I met Anders Moreby, and we started bands really early, all kinds of. We had a band called Overall Kings. And the first band we really had that did anything was Ghost. And I had bands with our neighbors called Sturex and all kinds of weird stuff. It was then much about music. Of course, I wanted to emulate this, what Dog was doing. He was in a band and I was in a band, so I have to do it. And Ghost took off. Dog took us under his wings and recorded some stuff in what later became actually Gory Sound and Unisound rehearsal room. We started recording with him there already in 1984. And we did live shows there also, 3 with Ghost. And from there, Ghost kind of took off into becoming Icarus, that later became Unicorn. And in parallel to Unicorn existing, we bought a 4-track recording machine. I mean, we had dabbled with Ghost. We had this cassette-based studio. So there are recordings of Ghost that we made ourselves, kind of a rehearsal tapes things. But once we bought this cassette-based studio, there are more proper, I wouldn't call it multi-track. You recorded drums and organ, and then you moved that tape to the first one. And while you recorded that tape onto the next tape deck in the machine, you could add vocals. But you had to record a whole song. You had to record the vocals at the right volume, of course. The balance needed to be right, or you had to do it all over again. And then you could take that tape and put it back in the first one and put another tape in, and then you could do another overdub and so forth. So those recordings have all been released in one way or another. And there's even a double LP and a CD with Ghost called 1983 to 1988 that you can buy if you want to check that out. Anyhow, with Unicorn, we bought the 4-track machine. We had borrowed a 4-track machine and dabbled around with a little bit, didn't understand it all that much. But, we got some recordings done that way with Brain Dead, among others. But, then we bought this MT100 from Yamaha, which was a 4-track. You could record drums on 1 track, bass on 2nd, guitar on the 3rd, vocal on the 4th. And I did God knows how many demos with my own stuff. I recorded my one-man thrash death speed black band called Mortify. It can also be on this Metal Collection CD. And After that, of course, I started to record other bands because I just heard that some of my friends were in bands and they recorded on various locations. And I think actually the shit I am doing in my rehearsal room sounds better than this. And I can do it, just buy me a 6-pack of beer or give me some homemade alcohol or whatever. And I record your demo, you know. And said and done, I did it with FZÖ. That consisted, of course, of Benny on drums, Andreas on bass, and Sami on guitar. That later became Age of Sanity, and Matthias on vocals. That recording still to this day sounds pretty cool, and it's of course magical because during this recording in November 1989, Age of Sanity formed as a kind of a byproduct to that recording. And from there on, it just snowballed. You know, there were local bands asking if they could record with me on my 4-track cassette thing, and they could. And then after a while, my brother convinced me that recording in stereo is a cool thing. And I didn't really know the difference between mono and stereo. I didn't know what a compressor was until God knows how late in the game. I just recorded, you know. And then you recorded the drums in stereo. And you could also record the guitars in stereo and everything. And you had two Porta studios, one MT2X and one MT3X from Yamaha, and you recorded on the first. You mixed that down to 2 tracks on the second one, and then you flipped that tape back, and then you had 2 free tracks where you could record a guitar solo and a vocal. And that meant that the recording started to sound pretty professional in some ways. You know, you did some of the famous demos that I did for bands, like the Gorment demo and you know, the Kurnogia from Age of Sanity. Well, that was actually still mono, but Gorment and that stuff I think was done in the 2 Porta days, you know. And the Weirdest of Tales from Unicorn sounds really good. Was also done in stereo. And after that, my brother decided to upgrade to an 8-track reel-to-reel recording machine from Fostex called R8, and I got to borrow that one. When I made demos, we split shit 50-50. He drove it all the way there together with the console, and I recorded really much stuff. You know, the Katatonia demo was done on it, the Marduk demo was done on it. We did a Dead But Dreaming demo with Age of Sanity. I did the first Pandemonium album on it. Yeah, lots of pretty cool stuff was done on that 8-track thing. And from there on, first I borrowed a 16-track from some local Christian dudes, but it was not really a working relationship that worked for me to have other people in the rehearsal room when I needed to be there, you know. So eventually I bought my own 16-track machines and they moved out. And I'm ever grateful that they did this because it made it possible for Unicorn to record on 16 tracks. I recorded, I think, Dissection, Somberlane on that old B16 machine and this and that. So there's no hard feelings. They were super cool guys, but there was just this vibe that someone else is in my studio and I'm not there, and I just couldn't cope with it. And the machine was not really that good with punching in and out. And then I bought the E16, which was cutting in and out of feedback, and you could not hear where the machine was punching in and out. It was a lifesaver when it came to the later recordings where I pretty much punched in and out all the guitars and bass on Edge of Sanity and others. And from there on, you know, it was decided that in 1993, I think it was in September, that I officially registered Unisound Recordings as my company. I quit ideas of a day job and welfare and all that stuff. And from that time, 93 until early 1997, I worked probably 340 days a year with all forms of metal and some stuff like hardcore punk. You know, it was really having a big hit with Millencolin that gave me my own gold record. And there were some other, you know, did some grunge stuff like Suckerfish and Auto Crash and some doomier stuff, you know, with Memory Garden and, you know, lots of other stuff that was really, really cool. And of course, my own shit with Edge of Sanity, Nightingale, Pandemonium, you name it. And then I put all the equipment down in the basement of the same house that I had the studio in the top floor was this weird place with a big tower, big black metal tower. And I just took the elevator down and started there, back to basics, no toilet, no daylight, in a cellar, much bigger than the first one, but shared it with a band called Moondog. And became good friends with them, and we had a lot of fun together. And that was pretty much where my musician part came to life again, when I did the Moon Tower album and I helped other guys out, but also really much from a musician standpoint, like doing the Diabolical Masquerade Nightwork album. And then I just, had a full-time job as a salesperson for studio equipment and guitars and high-tech and shit with some cool clients, like Abyss Studio, the band The Hives. I sold much stuff to SoundLab Studios, lots of other. I sold stuff to Sunlight, to Studio Underground, and that was my thing. And eventually, every now and then, some tourist would come in and say, "Are you Dan Swanö? Can I take a autograph?" Didn't do photos in those days, and I think, "Wow, someone remember me? How cool is that?" And then my career was that I did every now and then some little stuff on the side, and then it was actually to fast forward a little bit. The band November's Doom, they got in touch, and they didn't really get it that I was quitting and out of the loop. So they say, "We want you to do our next album. We cannot work with Neil Kernon anymore for budget reasons." And I was like, "You cannot work with Neil Kernon, the guy who did, Judas Priest and FM and Queenstrike, hello, you work with him, now you want to work with me? That's fucking insane." To even be mentioned in the same sentences, and that kind of, okay. But first I said no, and they said, come on. Then I gave them some outrageous, like, "Okay, but I want this much money," and they said, "Yeah, fine." It's like, oh, okay, so let's do it. And then I kind of did the first mix with a band that was not, I had done some mixing. I did a Dew Scented album, I did an Evoke EP, some dabbling I did, of course, but this was more like how it is still to this day. You get the recordings, although they showed up on CDRs rather than over the internet, and emailed back and forth with, instructions and feedback and stuff we should change. I used kind of reference albums and mixed all in the box. And, pretty much in this, in that album was the Pale Horn Departure from 2005. And immediately friends of theirs, I think they were called Eden Pauls or Eden's Fall or something like this. "Oh, can you mix our album also?" And from then, the rumor spread, thanks to this internet thing that was, becoming more and more of something other than just something you used to send emails. And all of a sudden I was back in the game so much that I had to decide if I wanted to quit my day job, but I was convinced to do it half-time. So I mixed and mastered full-time and worked half-time in the shop, is how I normally say it, because I would work and sleep almost nothing. One time I came from this physiotherapy session that I had in the morning, and I looked so messed up that the police actually stopped me because that guy should not be driving. He must be high on any drug that existed. So they followed me all the way into the park house, and I was like, "Hey, what the fuck?" Yeah, I said, "Hey man, how are you doing? Can you please blow into this thing?" And I just explained, so I had 2 hours of sleep and then physiotherapy, and sorry, I'm a little bit tired. And I said, "Hey, okay, get some rest, guy, So that's a memory from those days, and that had to end. So it was decided in 2011 I will go full-time as a guy who just did studio mixing and mastering. And a little bit later I actually moved to Germany, and I could do it even a little bit more relaxed. I didn't have to work around the clock. My girlfriend, now wife, of German, what do you say, German origin? She's a German Frau. And together, we are still together, and we moved around a bit. And now I have this nice, cool studio here at the house in northern Germany. And it's never been better. It's super. I love the idea that I can get up in the morning and do mixing and mastering and make a decent living, and just, did all the reissue stuff with Edge of Sanity and Nightingale and Moon Tower. And yeah, it's fantastic. And I hope it can be like this until I retire in, 15 years. So if you want your album mixed or mastered, just go to unisound.se and make sure to get in touch. Okay, Edge of Sanity. Well, this one will be a bit brief because don't want me talking for a whole day, which it would take to dive deep into this stuff. But We started out in November 1989 as a project, and then we reformed as a proper band in January 1990. And by the time we had reached kind of mid 1990, we did a demo called Kurnugia, which I later sent to what I believe to be a record label in Sweden called Tyfon, which I knew was involved in the battery stuff. And we got an answer, and the guy, Börje Boss Forsberg, was super interested. And apparently it had also Quarton from Bathory's approval to move forward. And that was always good to know. Didn't know at the time. But we did then a promo called The Dead. And he liked that one too. We saw us live when we opened up for Entombed. And just weeks later, we were thrown into the studio Montezuma in Stockholm. Apparently, studio time that was meant for Bathory, but for some reason they couldn't do it. So that was the rush, you know. And in a really short period of time, I think so 54 hours or something was built for recording and mixing Nothing But Death Remains. That was a huge disappointment when it came out, because the sound was nothing like it when it was mixed. You had this weird volume dips all over the album. The cover artwork changed the tone from more kind of earth brown to what we call ice on the moon blue. But, you know, it doesn't matter. It was our first album, but it didn't really become all this what we were hoping it would become. But it created a minor buzz. You know, we got some attention throughout Europe, at least. I don't know if it ever reached America. And it didn't really sell all that good. And we felt, okay, that's it. You know, we will be dropped and we will go back to be a demo band. So we did a Dead But Dreaming promo that was going in a very dark, more pure death metal direction. And we sent it to Boss, and famously he said, yeah, after hearing the first two songs, I was sure that we were not going to work together. But then When All Is Said, which was a death metal ballad with piano or doom death piano thing, whatever you want to call it, and that he loved, because Bathory was taking a turn to this, Hammerheart, Twilight of the Gods kind of doomy style. And he told me he saw that this band is going somewhere other than just this death metal, which was honestly, it was getting a little bit old then already. The big explosion with Clandestine from Entombed and all that stuff had already happened. And it's like, yeah, what's next? You know, where do we go from here? It's like death metal peaked at a really short moment in time, at least the world I was in. And it was decided that we should do another album. So we returned to Montezuma sometime in extremely early 92 or really late 98, 91. I cannot remember. I know that one was, we had to travel on Christmas and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think that was probably this one. I cannot fucking remember. Anyhow, it's all in the liner notes from the reissues if you want to know more about Unorthodox starting date. We did the whole album in a couple of weeks. Had more time. We had brought our own equipment. The first time we had used the studio stuff because we thought a studio have equipment, but it doesn't unless you are like a small project-based studio. And we learned that the hard way. So we had my Tama drum kit, Benny brought his cymbals. We brought guitar amps, our little one, this 12-inch, one 12-inch speaker combo from Yamaha. We had two of those, one for each guitar player, and Sami had a distortion pedal, and Andreas had a heavy metal pedal, and the bass, I don't know what we used, maybe something from the studio, I don't remember. Anyhow, that record did a little bit better, of course. We got a good review in Aftonbladet, 4 out of 5, and Black Mark was still not really a machine in the way that other labels turned out to be, like Nuclear Blast and Central Media. And, you know, we got some fan mail, made some interesting contacts through that album, and some underground stuff. And Enigma was a little bit of a hit that summer when it came out, much thanks to the clean vocal passage, which was not really done that often, if ever, on a death metal recording in that time, anyway. And yeah, we just did what we did, in 1992. And I felt that my time as a death metal writer and singer was coming to an end, because my studio was picking up, and I was in a relationship for the first time, and the other guys were going more in a, there were other bands. We were all playing all other kinds of music. We were doing grunge. I was, more into other kinds of stuff than death metal. Death metal felt old. So, but we were scared shitless about telling Black Mark that we wanted to quit as a band. So it was decided that we would make an album anyway, but more as a project, because we started as a project, turned into a band, and now we were just back to being a project again. No big deal, or so I thought, but it's not so easy. We pretty much stopped rehearsing. I think one of the last rehearsals we ever did was in the summer of '92, when we wrote and finished off Across the Fields of Forever and Jesus Christ. And some stuff was ready already in unorthodox times. A song like Lost, for example. The idea to cover Blood of My Enemies was also ready. And then, according to some interviews that I read, that I totally forgot about, Dark Day was also ready already in time for unorthodox, but made the clever decision to save one killer song for the next album, which I cannot remember, but I said it in an interview, so I guess it's correct. And anyway, The Spectre of Sorrows came out, and I was scared shitless. I thought people will fucking kill me, because what you have on there, you have a gothic rock song, you have a Manowar cover, and there's other clean singing, and there's not really a clone of Unorthodox in any way. It's a very brave album to put out in 1993. But people loved it. We had proper distribution for the first time, working with House of Kicks in Sweden and probably Scandinavia, and it seems to be working. Black Mark was working. So all of a sudden we were kind of, hip and cool, but we were not really functioning as a band at all. And we just said, okay, then let's go on and do it this way, try to not play that many shows, because that meant rehearsal, and rehearsal meant rehearsing after I had recorded something in the studio for 8 hours, and, it was a kid on the way, and, it was much going on in 1993. So we went down the project route, and the first thing we did then was, apparently I wanted to quit the band. I read also in an interview, doing research for the reissues. And I wanted to do it all myself, and that didn't happen. So we kind of got back together and did the Until Eternity Ends EP, which was showing kind of a direction that we were supposed to take, playing more of a kind of heavy metal, death metal thing, which is, in the style of songs like Until Eternity Ends or Eternal Eclipse, or a cover version of a Police song called Invisible Sun. And somehow those songs should have been the next album, but they were not, because Black Mark found out that we were gonna go in a more of a death metal direction again, after the other guys thinking that this whole heavy metal thing is maybe not the best idea after all. So, and then Black Mark said, no, you cannot go back to the roots, you must go to the future, or whatever Boss said, and then I said, oh, okay, let's do that then. So yeah, it didn't really become anything. It became a bit of a mishmash between going forward and backwards, because you have some extremely brutal songs on there, like Of Dark Some Origin, you have Elegy, which, and of course Enter Chaos, which are pretty straightforward, almost black metal-ish death metal stuff. And then you have commercial stuff like Black Tears, you have Twilight, a really bad attempt of an industrial song in the last track that I don't even remember what it's called at the moment. Anyhow, from there, we went a year completely without gigs or anything. We won the Zeppelin Awards, which is like a Grammy for metal in Sweden, for Best Album, which was fantastic. But we were not even there to pick it up, because it was on like a Tuesday evening and hours and hours away, and we were all going to work, or, to school or whatever. Not school, work. We were too old for school. Anyhow, after that, what the fuck do you do? Yeah, I moved away from Finspång to Örebro. And when you don't rehearse or function as a band, it's really hard to come up with good stuff. So I realized an old childhood dream of mine to make a one-song album, much in the way that Jean-Michel Jarre and Mike Oldfield and some of the prog bands that I listened to had at least done songs that were more than 20 minutes, and I dabbled a little bit with 20-minute songs with the Ragoon China track with Pandemonium. So I felt up for it, and the other guys just shook their heads and said, "Oh yeah, whatever." So we gathered in Unisound control room in Örebro. And all 5 of us actually wrote the song in less than 24 hours, spread out over a couple of days, of course. And then we had all the building blocks for what eventually would become Crimson. And the guys came back a little bit later, recorded the stuff also in 24 hours, I think. And then me and Andreas spent probably also 24 hours writing the lyrics, which was really, really hard work, especially since we were hangover as fucking dogs after visiting the Millencolin release party and drinking our brains out. And after that, I spent what felt like an eternity doing my bits, the vocals and my guitar parts and the mixing, which was a fucking nightmare. And after Crimson, I felt that things needed to be done differently. I wanted to play all the guitars and bass on whatever I wrote, so I could write more from the heart. When I wrote a riff that had really cool stuff that I knew that the other guitar players did not really care for, because they came from a punk hardcore background. They didn't care about all this progressive metal trickery on the guitar that I was getting more and more into. So by the time we got to Infernal, I recorded and wrote my songs. Benny played the drums, and the other guys did their stuff. I did the singing on it. And I think on 2 songs I didn't even do that. So already then you had kind of the sound of Edge of Sanity without me in any way, not in the writing and also not as a vocal performer. And after Infernal was released, I told the other guys in a letter that I think this is going nowhere. And because I did so much for this project to keep it alive and all that, I want the name. You can go and do whatever you want. And I, as a solo artist, want to be Edge of Sanity. They did not agree, understandably. And the label said, no, you cannot do that, so fuck you. They are Edge of Sanity. They did the Cryptic album with Robban from Pandemonium and Fuldör and Kill on vocals. And I wanted to do an album as a kind of a death metal thing. That didn't really work out. So I got more the vibe of making a progressive metal album with growls that was called Moon Tower under my own name. And that was that, I thought, with Edge of Sanity. And years later, I got in touch again with the label, Blackmark, and they asked, could you do, another solo album maybe? And I said, yeah, why not? Started gathering material and writing and fixing and fixing. And out of the blue, they asked, we would make your budget 10 times bigger if you release it as Edge of Sanity rather than under your birth name. And I was like, that's a really weird thing to say. But that's the way Boss worked, And I thought, yeah, then that means I could pay off all the debts. I had this really terrible loan going with like a 30% interest or whatever. Basically, you were only paying the cost of the loan and not really paying any money back to the bank. I would still probably have that fucking loan if it wasn't for the idea of Crimson 2 that actually had started as some dude got in touch and say, hey, can you write me Crimson 2? I will pay whatever, I have money. And I'm like, okay, why not? I need money. So as a kind of a secret side gig, I would just write for him upon lyrics that he wrote an entire second Crimson. That never happened. He spent the money on something else, and thankfully. But I thanked him for the original idea anyway. And then it was this weird, awkward meeting in Finspång on Kristi Himmelfärd. Sometime, I think 2000 and whenever, 2 or 3, something. With some of the other members, and Boss was on my side and the other guys was on the other, and Boss just did his sales pitch like, you did this album without Dan, it costed a fortune and it's not selling, I need my money back, so I need another Edge of Sanity release, and Dan is going to do it, and it's also going to bring back the catalog, it's going to start selling, you're all going to make money, and I'm going to make my money back, and blah, 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 blah. And the other guys just, yeah, okay, let's do it. I felt super, super awkward. But it kind of made it possible for me to use some of the ideas from the first Crimson album and, shape them up a bit, and kind of like a sequel can have flashbacks to the first movie. This have musical flashbacks, and but it's not really built on Crimson again, but it's kind of the same. One song, 43 minutes this time. I did some attempts at growling, and my first choice to replace my growling was Jonas Granvik. And I also thought it could be cool to bring in another guy to, spice it up a bit. So Roger Johansson from Paganizer showed up, and I think I did some work with him for Rib Spreader and stuff. So we knew each other, and I was not going to growl. I was going to sing clean. But when we were doing the growling recording in the office of my boss at the music shop that I worked up, I put up a little temporary studio in there with some fancy Neumann rip-off mic, and I tried growling, and it didn't really sound all that bad that I thought. I thought my voice would die in just like 2 lines. And sadly, Jonas Granvik's voice didn't really work for as long as we thought. So he was kind of reduced more to a backing vocal or, doubling Roga's vocal duty. He have no single parts on the album. And in the end, I talked with Matthias Eklund from Free Kitchen to do some solos, but scheduling conflict happened and he couldn't do it. So Mike Weed and Simon Johansson did it instead. And I'm eternally grateful for that. The album came out. The mix sounds like a piece of garbage. But it kind of worked anyway, somehow. Some people like it. Some people don't like it. Some like it more than Crimson. And Clive Nolan from Arena, a family friend at the time, wrote the lyrics. And I'm eternally grateful for that help. It's actually a really good story. I went over it several times now when I did the reissue, because, checking up the lyrics and the spelling and everything, Century Media is a little bit more careful than Black Mark, to say the least. And of course, I got the opportunity to remaster it, and that made a big difference. But to remix it made all the difference in the fucking world. And because some of the stuff was lost, did really terrible file management, and I had to re-record a lot of the stuff, and including there was some vocals missing. So Brandon from Mother of Graves did a great work of adding some vocals, and all the guitar solos were lost. And because of, I just wanted to have a difference to the remix, even though I could probably have paid Mike Weed and Seaman and found time, waited for them to kind of replay the solos from the originals. I didn't really feel that I had neither the time nor the money to do that. So I did what I usually do. I go to what I've been doing at work. And then there is this band called Tio. And the guitar player there, Andy Rose, was extremely good. And the music was this like, oh, fuck, I wish this was something I could release under my name. This is so good. And also Travis Neal on vocals, really good stuff. You should check it out. And I just asked him, could you do all the solos for Crimson 2? And, I don't really have a budget, so maybe we could trade studio time for your time. And we did. And I mean, I did have a fantastic budget, but I have blown it all on other things around the Crimson 2, because the budget is, of course, based upon how much of a success we think the album will be. And in all honesty, the budget for Crimson 2 was nowhere near the budget for, restoring, reissue, remixing of something like Purgatory Afterglow, for example, which is estimated to sell a lot more. So, I really had no money to throw at someone. So I did it that way. And the remix is fantastic. I'm super, super happy with the way it came out. And did also the Elegy compilation. There will be an Elegy 2, of course, at a later moment in time, where you have all the remix demos, you have the remasters of all stuff, and the Elegy 2 will have all the weird stuff. But you will see more about that when they make the announcement sometime, I don't know, later this year or early next year, maybe. So, that's pretty much that about the Edge of Sanity releases. Well, Bloodbath, that's another one of those project things that happened a little bit in the same way like so many of my other projects. Some that, were kind of stillborn. We did one rehearsal, recorded something, and nothing else happened. And some stuff took off, and to this day is the biggest stuff that I was involved in, like Edge of Sanity, or in some ways also Nightingale, Pandemonium, and all that stuff. But with Bloodbath, it's I wanted to try out some new equipment that I was thinking about buying. And I had learned that you need to really give the equipment pretty much of a hard time in a full-on recording situation before you can fully evaluate if this piece of digital equipment at the end of the 90s was actually all it's was promising to be, with how many tracks you could record at the same time. Was there a latency issue? How was it to work with? So I didn't really have any local friends there in Örebro that I felt that I wanted to work with. So I called up Anders Nyström from Katatonia and Diabolkan Masquerade, and we always worked well together. And I remember that when they were recording For Funerals to Come in my studio in Finspång, they had written on the guestbook page from Katatonia, when will Bloodbath record? And I was just asking them, what's Bloodbath then? Yeah, this is our American death metal project that we will do sometime. And, some stuff just sticks. And then a few years later, I call them up and say, hey, you want to record Bloodbath? I have this thing that I want to try. And, I can volunteer as the drummer. And, Anders and Jonas, you can come and we do this American death metal. Yeah, maybe Mike can come along, Mikael Åkerfeldt from Opeth. And said and done, the guys showed up. We had a blast of a time. We went partying, and all was just like in the name of checking out some new equipment. We wrote and recorded 2 songs, Breeding Death and Ominous Blood Vomit. And like I said, had fun, nothing more of it. Luckily, I made a rough mix, or pretty much a ready mix, but I thought maybe I tweak some shit some other day. But it was mixed, made a cassette version on Mike's Aussie Bark at the Moon cassette that I still have lying around somewhere. And that was that. And I was actually going down to record a cover version from Lucretia, My Reflection, Sisters of Mercy. And I didn't really know how this VS 1680 machine from Roland worked. So I just pushed many times on the undo button. And I had copied the session. You have one session that was called Bloodbath. I had a copy of the Bloodbath session. And I thought, when I don't want the sound files from Bloodbath in my copied session, I can just press or roll actually the scroll wheel of the undo until I'm back to 0, because this means that those audio files are no longer in this project, so I can start recording from 0. And I did, and pushed save or yes or whatever, and I recorded my cover version, and that was that. And then I think, maybe I could see if I can do anything better with the Bloodbath recording, and mix it a little bit better, because I think not even the beginning of the first song was not really even on the cassette. It was in those old times, it was like, still is on cassettes, a little piece of a few seconds that is no music on. So sometimes when you were a little bit too quick to record, it was cut off, and that happened, of course. And that's why the reissue of the demo version have this Morbid Angel rip-off of the backwards sound of Breeding Death, and then a snare hit, and then the song starts. So anyway, the Bloodbath session was empty. The files were no longer in the Bloodbath session either. They had been deleted from the hard drive because I had done the undo function too many times in the copied session with the cover version from Sisters of Mercy. A very strange way of having a copy. I just imagined that copy would copy the files and they would still be there, and who needs 2 of every file, But you learn the hard way. Everything was gone except the cassette copy. So with the tail between my legs, I called the guys up, crying, almost like, oh fuck, I deleted this funny cool thing we did, so I cannot mix it properly, but who cares, maybe it's okay the way it is. And then the guy said, no, yeah, but want to release it maybe, and this and that. And I said, okay, then then I will pay for your tickets to come back and re-record it. And they showed up, and it was, I had been to the dentist in the morning, and the vibe was different, than the first time, not so party. And but anyway, we had a great time, and we wrote one more song called Furnace Funeral, and this is where the seed was sown to go more in a Swedish death metal direction, although the sound is very American sounding. still on this Breeding Death EP. We didn't use any heavy metal pedals or anything like that. And then we made up the idea that this should be a lost demo from the not so cool part of the 90s. Because when everyone started playing death metal and released demos, there were a dime a dozen of death metal bands from Stockholm, and it was probably so that a few got lost, in the storm of death metal. And we pretended that Bloodbath was one of them. We wanted to do a cassette. We actually did a thanks list that would be on our homemade cassette cover, and we would just leak it in a digital form. Of course, that I scanned this cover and I digitized this old cassette demo of this forgotten old Swedish death metal band. Check this out and create some kind of strange online phenomenon. But before that could happen, the guys in the band, who were of course making a living as musicians, I was not at the time. I was working full time in a music shop and just had the studio for fun. They said, Century Media, I want to release it. They love it. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. And in the end, I gave in. The stuff was mastered and eventually released as the Breeding Death EP. And at the time, there was not really that much death metal going on in the world. Every band was, some bands were still doing what they used to do. They were maybe even more brutal than ever. But, it was not really focused on death metal. And if you said you played old school Swedish death metal, guys would just say, okay. And, shake their head, that old stuff, But anyway, it came out. It was a hit, made some money, and it was funny. And then, the phone call came, Century Media, I want to release a full-length album. Are you up for it? And I was like, no way in hell that I'm doing a full album of death metal songs at this point in my life, when I was hell-bent on doing, only melodic stuff. I had kind of retired from metal, even in some online statement. But, that's the way I work, black or white. Yeah, eventually, after much consideration, I realized that it's been kind of 10-year anniversary of the boom of Swedish death metal. And, 10 years means, tributes, anniversaries. And so I said, I will do an album, but it will be a clone of the early Sunlight sound, 89, 90 albums with the most brutal fucking chainsaw guitar sound, and the drums should sound like they do, on these albums, a bit like a spiced up kind of dry in your face sound, and total homage, tribute to Left Hand Path and, the first Carnage album and all that stuff. And the guys were like, whatever, let's just make an album. So it was decided that we split the songwriting. I write a bunch of songs, Jonas a few and Anders a few, and we get together in my little home studio and record. And that was that, The album came out and it was successful again. And then the phone call came that, let's do another album. And, we did. And same system really. But I felt that in order for it not to be more of the same, we should get ourselves a decent drummer, because I felt that my drumming was more of this kind of Bill Andrews on Leprosy kind of tuka tuka tuka. That's what I like, But I thought it could be cool to play with someone like Gene Hoglan or some hyper technical drummer, so you could really go mental. And I know the other guys, they felt a bit limited by my drumming, because their favorite death metal was always this hyper technical American stuff, and it's not really my cup of tea. So in order to let everyone have their go at their death metal, it was decided that we should get a hold of a really good drummer, and we tried to, and it's really so that we couldn't really find anyone that we felt would be easy to work with. And then one day at my day job, I talked to a guy called Mattias Camillo, who worked in Musikbörsen Linköping. And I just mentioned to him, like, we have this project now, and we're looking for a drummer. And I dropped some names, and he said, you should check out the drummer in my band. And I was like, that's what people always say, But no, he's really good. He's playing with Patrik Jensen in Satanic Slaughter and some other stuff, and he's rehearsing to click track and triggering the kicks, so he hear really that what he is playing is perfect. And then I was like, sounds like an interesting character, and I thought, well, yeah, why not, he will probably do it just as good as a famous drummer and probably at a tenth of the price, and we will not have the hassle of booking flights and fixing and trixing with airports and all that shit. So said and done, I got in touch with Martin Axenroth, and he showed up. None of us had even really heard his drumming, I think, and he was just a fucking machine, nailing all the stuff that was recorded to a drum machine that was like metronomically perfect. He just went in with a click track and replaced all the drums, and you could pretty much tell him what kind of weird fill-ins you had in mind, and I would go, could you play like, and he would be like, yeah, you mean like this, and he would play that on the drums. You're like, first take, nailed it. So we were all completely blown away. Then it was the singer problem, because Opeth had taken off, and there was no way in hell that Mikael Åkerfeldt would be involved in Bloodbath anymore on a recording. So we thought also about, maybe we should get some super famous guy, like, I think we seriously thought about David Vincent, to the point of contacting his management. And we got a standard reply of, these are the terms, and it would be some kind of American standard vocal fee, per song. Maybe something come from country music or whatever, but it would end up being like all of our budget would go to David Vincent, and then we had nothing to record the album for. So that would not work. And, through my day job, I was in touch with Peter Techtgrenmatch, selling him all kinds of strange equipment to Abyss Studio. And we were just chit-chatting one day, and I had recently, also a little bit musically been involved, and with Pain, and I don't know if I did the Hypocrisy lyrics there yet, and then just during one of our phone calls, you fancy singing some death metal, you will get this amount of money and you will come by, and it's like you are our vocal AI before they existed. It's like, this is what you sing, like we did it on our demos with the best of our ability. And he just did replace line by line pretty much what the guys wanted to sing, with a really, really good death metal voice. This guy is almost as good as Mike, and I think on the record it sounds fucking magical. And from there, my songs, Eaton is one of my biggest online successes, and probably also one of the most known songs, which is a little bit strange, because after writing a bunch of songs like Brave New Hell and I don't really remember the other ones that I wrote for that album. Stillborn Savior, I think, is one. I felt they were old school, but a little bit too clever to be proper old school. And then I remember what it was that I liked so much about death metal, and so in the beginning, and that was this simple stuff. You had some riff. They were like the riff for World Eater from Bolt Thrower, for example, was just one of the things that I felt like this. I need to be slightly more retarded. I need to lower my IQ. So in the mindset of, okay, you're a little bit stupid. What kind of death metal would you write? You would not think too much about cool scales or cool whatever. You would write something that felt a little bit more, I don't know, not so fancy. And then you got this kind of a Beavis and Butthead riff, and then junk, that kind of shit. And it just felt like, is this taking the piss, or is this genius, or is it just fucking awesome? What is it? I don't know. But at the end, inspired by the tale of that guy who paid someone to kill him and eat him, not knowing of the Rammstein song. I don't know if it was even existing at the time. I just think, eat it. That is also so like, not even singing like consumed or any cool. It's just like proper normal word. taking a bit inspiration from how obituary would be like turned inside out or chopped in half, and just go with this more like traditional language scenarios than trying to look for the other 6 meanings of the word in a dictionary and then put together a title that no one understands. And then you say, yeah, it's about being cut in 2 pieces. Okay, but why don't you say that in the title? No, I want to be, smart. So Ethan is ironically a song with me intentionally lowering my IQ, and it's becoming the biggest song. And after that, we did a show on Wacken, and it was a great time. And then I was unceremoniously fired from the band because I saw it as a project. They wanted to see it as a band, and there was no way in hell I could have done what they did, later on with touring and all that stuff. And that was that about my time in Bloodbath. If you want to know about the records they had done since, you had to look somewhere else. Well, it's a bit strange to go from Bloodbath to Unicorn, but it's who I am, a lot of different styles. And the Unicorn albums, I would like to include also, of course, the partly re-recorded and remixed version of the A Collection of Worlds demo, A Collection of Worlds Resurrection, which in many ways is for me the ultimate Unicorn album, because I think it is our best work. And in many ways, the first true Unicorn was this, when we were a 4-piece and we lived and died by our music, and we did a bunch of really good demos. And that's the record you should check out, really, if you want to know what Unicorn really was all about. Then we kind of disbanded after the After Before demo. And one day Anders Moreby, the guitar player, got in touch and said, there's this Italian label. They want to reissue the demos on a CD. And we were all like, no, that's strange. We were all in different places musically at the time. I think, no, we have to update the old songs to be more in the vibe of this, what we are listening to at the moment. And then we set off to do the Ever Since album, which consists of a few songs that the label head Mauro Moroni insisted were on, and they were Liquify and Zoetrope. And the rest of the stuff, we did a combination of old material and a few new songs. And in all honesty, there's really not that much from that album that I think is fantastic, mainly because the production is kind of strange. The drum sound is not so funny. I just bought this trigger module from Alessis called the D4, and we insisted on using the kick and the snare from the sample module, making it sound like a not very tight drum machine. And the rest of the drum sound is also pretty strange and weird with the mix. The phase is all wrong, and it's not really my best vocal work also. But of course the keyboard, the bass and the guitar playing is top notch. It's only my work that is not the best, really, to be brutally honest. And not really an album that I listen to that often. I have transferred the original analog master tapes and all the synth stuff from the Atari MIDI, and maybe someday when I'm retired, I will try to resurrect some of the songs that I felt was left for dead, really, because it was just stressy. I remember trying to sing one of the songs like super early in the morning because I had to go to work later, and you can hear that it's uninspired. The vocal harmonies are not really what they should be, and the vocal performance is strange. I found out then that I couldn't really sing the vocal melody that I had written for a song called Draw. So I had to change it on the spot, and not really one of my favorites. And a few years later, we were offered to do another album by the same label, Mellow Records in Italy. And we felt, yeah, why not? At least we had a bit fun, and we kind of got back together as a 3-piece again. And Unicorn was very much a project. We never rehearsed or anything like that. So we started writing some new songs, and some of them are the best Unicorn stuff. You have Hiding Again, and at the end of the bridge, Emotional Wasteland. The Boy and the Impossible have some good moments. And then we re-recorded some old demo stuff. After Before sounds fantastic. Suddenly sounds fantastic. And also Anders More, we have this fantastic acoustic song called The Spring, which is really good. And yeah, Waterfall is maybe, it's more of a fun thing. We were trying to do some kind of Yes around the time of, Big Generator and so on, more of a pop prog hit song. And probably some other stuff that I forgot is on there. Emotional Wasteland is a really good album. Also this one I have transferred from the analog tapes and sent all the MIDI, and I have been messing around a little bit with remixing. I've come pretty far with Suddenly at one point, and it's more a labor of love, but sadly there is really no budget to justify me spending all the time, even trying to get all the files perfectly in sync. It's not really gonna happen until I eventually retire and have some time to sit and mess around without the clock ticking and say, hey, you must make this many euros per minute or things are not working out. So yeah, I hope you check out the Unicorn albums. You can buy them on Bandcamp from Mellow as downloads, and the same from the Swanö merch page on swanommerch.myshopify.com. You can also get the Collection of Worlds Resurrection download. And of course, it's available on vinyl and on CD from Alone Records. Odyssey, yeah, that's a different kind of project, really. I was writing some stuff that I felt was not really working for any of the projects that I had in mind. And I wanted to do something together with some of the friends I hang out a lot with at the time, Kenta Philipsson and Rick Gustafsson. And together we kind of made 3 songs. I made one song completely on my own, but the lyrics were from Rick. And then I did one song with Kenta, and I did one song with Rick. And it was some kind of project pretty much earmarked for release by this Utopian Vision label from Ed Balog that was involved with Blackmark at the time. And it was a projectaholic time. I liked doing all that kind of stuff. And musically, I was pretty inspired by this more like a heavy doom, heavy metal kind of thing. And I'm still to this day very proud of these 3 songs. There are some really good moments on there, both musically and performance-wise. I was really on the top of my game when it came to drumming around that time. And I remastered it for the first, Reinventing the Past, and it sounds pretty bad. But the new Reinventing the Past that is available as streaming from Sony Central Media on Spotify have a proper remaster that sounds like the EP actually sounded, only a little bit better. So yeah, that's the EP. And then of course the original idea was just to reissue the EP on Vic Records and do a few cover versions as a bonus. But in the end, I made so many cover versions, and the label boss, Roel, felt it was cooler to actually put out a new Odyssey cover album with the EP as a bonus, which was not the plan at all. But I love all the cover versions. I think some of them are top of the game of my cover versions. The Shake the Disease from Depeche Mode, and also In the Heat of the Night from Sandra, In the Eyes of the World from UFO, turned out to be extremely good, I think. And like I said, it's been remixed for the cover stuff. I don't have the masters for the EP, sadly, but I have the masters for the album, or the cover bonus songs, so that they can also be found in the remixed state on Spotify. And I'm not sure if there can be any links to all this stuff in the description of this video or not, but otherwise, well, just go to Spotify or any other streaming outlet and Google Odyssey Reinventing the Past, and I'm sure the remix will show up. So Nightingale, that's an interesting one. Well, it started out as a solo project, ego project that I was doing in my studio for like a week, just going down there, writing and recording songs pretty much on the spot. Some strange concept album with an idea that I dreamt up one day. And yeah, it was supposed to be a one-off, It was nothing more should come of the Nightingale project. And the album came out, and it was more of a success than anyone had thought it would be. And music is some kind of combination of everything that I was really into at the time, which was I was going back a little bit to listen to hard rock again, especially the darker, more kind of gothic vibe hard rock, like Night Comes Down from Judas Priest is obviously very inspirational for the track Nightfall Overture, and also the song Belief from The Mission was extremely important. And that mixed up with some of the songs from The Mission and Sisters of Mercy, and also a song called Leave Me for Dead by Rosetta Stone was big on this. But I also used some, inspiration from shoegaze stuff like Bloody Valentine and Slow Dive, and there's even some little black metal vibes in there, some Iron Maiden vibes. It's a very all over the place kind of thing, and there were never any demos made. Just wrote, recorded, and went forward, all in a really short period of time. And then, like labels normally do when something is kind of selling okay, they got in touch and say, hey, would you want to make another solo album? And I was like, nope, no gothic rock here for me. So you just do whatever you do, we want a solo album. And then I didn't know what to do really, because I was not into gothic rock, and I was more into classic rock or AOR, pump rock kind of thing at the moment, at the time, I should say. And so first I called Peter Edvinsson, my unicorn band mate, also band dude from Subway Mirror. And he was not home, he didn't pick up. And I think, oh, okay. And rather than call him again another day, I called my brother. I say, hey, and he picked up, so would you come to Örebro and be my producer and just make sure that I actually go to work and do something, and help me write and record, because I don't have much time. And thankfully he did. And he was also on kind of a trip, going back a little bit to stuff that he hadn't listened to in a long time. And, we were more in this kind of progressive rock, progressive pump, AOR vibe mindset. There are parts that sound a bit like Santana, there's Gamma, there's Foreigner, there's even some Rush before I listened to Rush. And, there's a bit of that Nightingale vibe in the guitar tuning and the guitar playing and this and that, but definitely a different beast than The Breathing Shadow. And it was released in 96. And the album also came out in America, which is cool, because I made some friends and they say they just went into the biggest CD shop in town, and Nightingale had their own little spot there and just bought the record and went home and listened and loved it. The kind of thing you dream about as a kid, that you would have proper distribution and sometimes even manufacturing in America. That was super cool. And then Nightingale died. We did a little bit of a thing called the Childhood Chronicles, which was, was like, there's no gothic rock on the Closing Chronicles. Please do goth, So I did 3 songs, 3 cover versions. C'est la vie from Greg Lake, Before the Dawn from Judas Priest, and Return to Fantasy. Return to Fantasy with Uriah Heep in gothic rock versions. And they were never released, but they're now on the reissue, of course. They are out. But, that was the last thing we really did then for Nightingale. And then the same thing happened over again. Black Mark said, could you do another Nightingale album? And I was like, nope, I don't think so. And then in another kind of errand, I was at my brother's place, and he was just re-recording some of his old stuff with new equipment. And it sounded really good and a bit heavier, and I thought, wow, these are really cool songs. They were more this darker Tom Noga tracks that I had kind of listened to a lot when I was in my mid-teens, when he was doing that stuff, respirator music and all that stuff. And I was also playing with his band as a drummer. So I think, wow, we could actually do some of this stuff that I had written that I don't know what to do with, and write English lyrics to these songs. We have the next Nightingale album that they're asking for. So why not? Yeah, and there was always this demand, for me to do an album. It was not like, oh, please, dear record label, can I do another album? And they go, no, you have to do it this way. It's always the other way around. And that was inspiring to me. Someone wanted something from me and I just got the budget to do it. And the I album came out and it died a horrible death in some kind of lawsuit problem between Blackmark and I think it was SPV. And it just didn't really happen. And my brother and I decided that Nightingale was history and we were going to play proper progressive rock under the name of Antarctis. And we did actually one song, or a demo of a song, that's also on the reissue of, I think, of the Alive Again album, which is, it's technically something leading up to that one rather than, something that was before the I. The reissue stuff is always what led up to the album, not what came after. So speaking of Alive Again, that was the next one, and we did a few shows with Nightingale as a 4-piece after the release of the Closing Chronicles, and nothing more come of it. But there was this idea all the time to maybe sometime do it again. And when Tom Björn from Memory Garden told me that he loved the I album, I was first in shock that someone actually bought it. And second, that such a talented drummer liked it. And he said, yeah, if you ever need a drummer, and I'm like, not a bad idea, actually. So I spoke to my brother about it, and he told me that there were all kinds of ideas, that there would be a trio with me on bass and vocals, and he would play guitar and keyboards, and Tom on drums. And there were other ideas that more members, I don't remember, but eventually it was decided that I would play guitar, Dag would play guitar, Erik would play bass, who was... he was doing much work. He did a Godsend album together with me, and he was playing in bands since the late 70s, early 80s in Finspång, and Dag and him played in a cover band together and this and that. And we knew he was a great singer, and he was also a bass player. And Tom, of course, from Memory Garden joined. And then we were actually really a proper band there for a bit. We didn't really rehearse that much for the Alive Again recordings. It was more like Dag wrote his songs, I wrote my songs. We recorded them at the Soundlab Studios, owned by Mieszko, rest in peace, and Matthias Färm from Millencolin. And after that, I would say that we really became a band because, we started rehearsing for gigs that we did, and we played some really cool festivals and all that kind of stuff. And then we really got really serious with the Invisible album. We did a full-on pre-production. We wrote the songs, we rehearsed, we tried stuff. And I think I even, let Erik sing a little bit, Dag sing a little bit backing vocals and this and that. And I can't remember any of that happening on the Alive Again album, where I did all the vocals in what later would become Fascination Street in the B studio. Learning to know Jens Bogren, actually. And Invisible was recorded in the Studio Underground by Pelle Säter, a really cool place. And I kind of brought my own equipment there to record on because I was not into recording on tape because, frankly, I was not good enough of a guitar player to play. I had to use the computer to patch things up, do 1,100 takes of 5 notes and put the 5 notes of the best take of each note together as one. That's the kind of way I still work whenever I record these days. And the Invisible album came out, and just like Alive Again, it kind of died a death being released on an album. On a label primarily known for death and black metal, like Blackmark. But we had a release party, and we actually, a little bit later, after doing the Nightfall Overture 10-year anniversary thing, we went on tour in Germany, and we were kind of serious. We're doing a lot of gigs, and God knows how many gigs we did at the end. Like they're all somewhere online. My brother have this kind of Excel file or so where he have all the gigs. It's on all the reissues that we have now out on Century Media and Sony. There's a lot of live material, and it's all from these gigs that my brother recorded on his portable device. Anything from cassette to, I think, maybe mini disc at one point, and then that player. And and then we started working on some stuff and eventually became White Darkness. which we recorded in a big hangar on the I3 area of Örebro. It used to be much, military stuff. It's an extremely big hall with a super cool, natural, long, woody kind of vibe to record drums. It was super cool. There's this making of video that you can see on YouTube, which is funny. There's also a little bit the making of I. There's the making of Nightfall Overture. It's kind of cool. I think there's a making of Invisible also out there somewhere. And White Darkness is an album that I recorded and mixed and played on, but not really all that much. I just wrote like a chorus of one song and a bridge of another, and just took care of some of my brother's old ideas and turned them into a song. So my contribution to White Darkness is minimal, but it's still a kick-ass album, and it's finally available on vinyl again from Century Media, of course, and it will be out in December in 2025, in case you listen to this sometime in the future. And then it was a long break, and eventually, after signing a deal with Century Media and Inside Out, decided to do another album, and that was Retribution. And it's, to this day, my favorite Nightingale album. It's got everything what I ever wanted from a Nightingale album after we kind of formed as a band, and kind of consciously designed it. I wrote almost all the songs on it, and the one I didn't write, I picked. So it's like, in a way, the way Nightingale worked in the very beginning, but we were still very much a band. All the guys are playing on it and singing on it, and it's I don't know if they're singing on it, to be honest. But anyway, it's a really, really good album. So if you check anything out, and I recommend that you try out Retribution, and some for the older Nightingale, Invisible and Closing Chronicles are really cool. And then we did actually a live album with the last show that I ever played, maybe. I haven't been on a stage since then, in 2016. It's 2017, the Rock Hard Live album came out, which is a really cool, and nothing have really been fixed, because it's not possible, because I based the sound on the audience mics to get this kind of vibe of a live concert rather than some tacky studio sounding thing with added audience. And it's also a great kind of best of to check out what Nightingale is about on stage. You should definitely check it out, and please do check out all the reissues. There are some really, really cool shit going on the bonus CDs of every recording. There's some really amazing remixes, some new recordings, some old stuff that not even I knew existed until my brother said, "Oh, I have some stuff here on a folder on my hard drive," and bam, there were demos for songs for White Darkness that I didn't remember doing. It's crazy. So that's all about Nightingale. I guess my involvement with black metal started around the time, say 1990 maybe, with the Marduk demo, Fuck Me Jesus, and then of course the Abruptum demos, the Satanist tunes being the most famous one, and also recording the 2 Abruptum albums. And and then from there on, the rumor spread that there was this weirdo in Finspång in a little cellar without any windows and a toilet where you could cut yourself while you were recording. And of course that appealed to black metal dudes. And so I even had bands like Dark Funeral showing up, and of course you had Dissection. There was Marduk making albums, Sacramentum, and there was pretty much stuff. And to this day I still work on some black metal stuff, and it was cool. It was a bit much at the time, because these guys don't have the most positive outlook on life, and sometimes this kind of drags you down. And when you spend 2 weeks, like 8-9 hours a day, with this kind of nihilistic, black-minded weirdos, you kind of become one yourself. And I guess that was one of the reasons that I kind of felt that I needed out from this whole recording bands in a studio under time pressure thing, because you never knew really who would show up, and you would just have to be with these people. I mean, I worked with so many fantastic people, but there were some dark days there in the height of the whole black metal thing, that I felt that maybe I don't need this in my life. So that's that about the black metal scene. I got to know Morgan Håkansson, I think it was in 1989. My most memorable thing was we were hanging out at the kind of backstage, what you want to say, from the Power Hour radio station in Norrköping, that was run by Robert Beshirovic and Erik, whatever his last name is, I don't remember. And they were doing the Close-Up magazine also. And I used to hang out there because I really loved this radio show. And whenever I was in Norrköping and I bought new records, I would go up there and try to, borrow them my LPs, because they were always the latest, coolest thrash metal imports. And, sometimes they played my stuff, sometimes not. And on one occasion, I met Morgan. He was kind of doing the same. And he said he was in a band, and I was in a band, and we just, started talking, and we became extremely good friends there for a while, and used to spend, a lot of time partying, talking on the phone, discovering new stuff. And very much thanks to him that I realized that there was a thing beyond buying the latest LP release. He was already in the death metal and thrash metal underground, writing letters and calling people up, and it took a while for him to actually start a band. I remember that he told me the first time we met that he was in a band called Anthropomorphas or something like this, but I guess it never really materialized. And we actually had a project together called Redamnation, which you will hear now as probably the first ever time that this has ever been in any radio show or so, because I found it when I was doing the deep dive for all the Edge of Sanity stuff. I found the only existing rehearsal of Redamnation. So listen to this. Yeah, that was Redamnation. I think me on drums and Morgan Håkansson on guitar. We didn't get very far. I remember that we had a really cool logo. And that was that. We could not really work together. We were both kind of alpha in this, like we needed to be band leaders, the both of us. So Marduk, it was, Morgan told me that he had found members, and he wanted to have his first band together. And it turned out that he had one of the Edge of Sanity guys, Andreas Axelsson, on vocals, and he played guitar. And a guy called Kalmar played bass, and Jocke Göthberg, that I have got to know. I also recorded Grimorium demo with him. He was the drummer. So they showed up sometime, cannot remember really when it was, 1990, I guess, to record the demo. And it turned out really good. It was something that I still think sounds extremely cool to this day. And not long after, they got a deal to do a 7-inch. And they came back and recorded 2 songs, and they were not released until a lot later. And after that, they got the record deal and booked my studio to record The Dark Endless. And I have not really all that much memories of that recording session. I do remember that we all lived together in my super small flat, and I don't know if we walked all the way to the studio or took the bus. I have no idea anymore. But it was great. It's like those recordings that nothing really weird happened. You tend to forget them. And Marduk took off really. And they signed then to Osmos that I was on with Pandemonium. And they came back, and then the lineup had changed. You had all of a sudden a guy called Bogge on bass, that I had met one time backstage at a show called Rock SM when we were playing there with Ghost. He was in a band called Chained, famous for having 2 bass players. They kept his bass a little bit lower in the mix. And also Devo, which was one of those really, really cool dudes from the Norrköping scene. that had been in all kinds of bands that I cannot really remember the name of now, but he was there since, Venom started, there was Devo. He was the sound guy at Nya Strömmen, so I got to know him. He was also in Allegiance together with Bogge, and they kind of teamed up with Mogge and Jocke, and from what I can remember, it was decided that they would switch singers, which was a little bit weird for me because Andreas was with me in Edge of Sanity, and they never told him to come down and do the vocals. And one day Andreas showed up and said, where are the guys? When do I sing? And said, sorry, you have been replaced. The album is already ready. And I think that was a pretty shitty way to fire someone. Yeah, but we were, teenagers, and some of us are and was afraid of conflict. And that was the way you did it in those days. And then, we did, the final time we worked together was a bit later with the Opus Nocturne. The lineup had changed. They had then a guy called Kire that I went to factory school with, then as a singer. And if you had asked me, when I started, when he started at the school, that this kid with the glasses and the short hair would one day be the singer of Marduk, I would say, yeah, all right, But he had a complete change, like I had, I also went from this kind of curly-haired weirdo that no one thought would be even into anything heavier than Judas Priest, and I became kind of this death metal dude. And Opus Nocturne turned out pretty cool, a very, very violent record, and it did a lot of good for I think my studio and also for Marduk as a band. And one funny anecdote is that Bogge told me that they used the intro from one of the songs where there's this long big drum fill where he play on all his, I don't know, 7 or 8 toms or whatever. They used it at competitions for car stereos, and eventually, actually, someone broke their subwoofers because there was just so much fucking bass on the production that it's kind of exploded. And I always took that as a sign that, that's a powerful production. Well, to dive a little bit deeper into the whole Incision project, which is something that I think musically is kind of interesting, but lyrically it's a little bit weird. This whole pornographic lyric thing did not age really well, but at the time we both thought it was exciting as teenagers to do that, and we didn't know of many bands who went that weird with that topic. And we recorded a demo called Perverted Possessions, which thanks to the distribution of a Belgian dude called Uncle Underground took off really much more than it normally did when we did this short projects. The songs were kind of written and recorded sometimes in a day, and then we did the recording of what we thought would be an EP, and that was never released. Also 2 really cool, heavy, strange songs, and all the Incision stuff can be found on the homepage from Swanö Merch. It's my shop, swanemerch.myshopify.com. You can buy the Metal Collection CD, and the stuff is also available on Bandcamp, if I'm not mistaken. And there you can buy the download and listen to Incision for yourself. I'm sure it's all over YouTube also, but there you have the proper remastered, good sounding versions of this very, very strange project where I played drums and sang. I had this weird thing that I had this effects device called the Rex 50 from Yamaha. You had a pitch shifter, and to get this extremely strange voice, I would sing my highest falsetto and then pitch it down as much. I think it was 12 or even 24 steps down, creating this completely new sound of my voice. Because when you pitch shift your growling voice, which I did with Tony, you get this super low, dinosaur sounding monster sound. But when you scream a falsetto extremely as high pitch as you can and you do that down in pitch, it sounds completely inhuman and completely messed up. So that's my singing. And Tony is this subsonic, you can almost not hear it kind of singing. And Tony played guitar and bass. And we had a great deal of fun doing it, actually. And we had a million weird projects. I don't even remember the name of half of them, but some of them made it to tape that exist to this day, actually. We were in Öargax, and we were together in Malfeitor, and we had a thing called Carnage for a while, not knowing of the other Carnage, of course, and God knows what. I got to know Tony Serke sometime in the 80s when he and I went to school together, and we were kind of in rival bands at the time. I was in a band called Ghost, and he was in a band called Witches Sabbath, and we were both gigging around locally in the Finspång area. He was later in a band called Midas Touch when I was still in Ghost, and we did some gigging, and eventually we ended up in the same kind of crossover thrash joke core band called Braindead. And from there on, we hung out a lot, and we realized that we had a lot in common. So we also formed several weird fun projects together called Terjan Tulle, Pultnarp, and all kinds of stuff where we experimented with the whole death metal stuff that Mikael Bolin from Braindead was not too interested in at the time. And then eventually that led to Abor in the summer of 1989. It was the first more serious attempt. And after I left Abor, me and Tony did not play in a band until we did Incision then later. But, it was a time when I was experimenting much with recording, and Tony was, trying all kinds of music style, and, that's pretty much, so didn't have anything to do. One weekend, Tony would call me, can I record a song? And he recorded sometimes The Eternal Walk with Ophthalmia, and sometimes he had another idea, and that was, of course, Abruptum. And the most famous one there is the Satanist Tunes demo that I felt, it honestly didn't sound all that evil and powerful. So for some reason, I just took the whole Porter Studio that I recorded on, this 4-track cassette thing, and I ran it through the reverb unit that we had bought. And all of a sudden, it sounded extremely crazy and evil and big and bombastic. And that was a game changer, really, for me as some kind of producer at the time to make such a drastic move. And it really sounded like it was recorded in hell. And with Ophthalmia, it was a matter of, he did endless demos of Eternal Walk, and later on he secured a deal, and I was lucky enough to be the guy to record the first and also the second album before I moved away from the city, Finspång. And this is also when our kind of recording adventures together stopped. Well, I got to know Jon the first time on Bergslagsrocken, the year that Morbid Angel and Pestilence played, and I think that was 1990. And he was always somehow in my life around that time, because he had the Mega Mag that I bought from him, and I really wanted to be in the next issue. So we started, I sent him the Age of Sanity demo, and we wrote letters back and forth, and I thought he was a really cool and funny guy. And then it was so that my studio became pretty popular through the whole explosion there with some of the black metal demos started circulating, and also he was friends with Tony from Abruptum and Ophthalmia, and it was then a natural choice to record at my studio, because I cannot really remember if he did Ophthalmia before Dissection or not. This is a bit of a blur, but I do remember that he liked the vibe of the studio during one visit he did, and that it was more like of a rehearsal room. There was no like window between the recording engineer and the recording artist, that you could speak and just like use headphones, and it was very unstudio vibe, and he liked this. And yeah, the guys showed up in March 1993 and created some real serious magic there with the Somberlane. And I'm extremely pleased with the way that album turned out. They were very well rehearsed, and it really took the world by storm, that one, and also made them come back to do Storm of the Lightsbane a bit later, which was a bit more complicated. They actually came back a little bit earlier in 1994 and did a few recordings for the Wrong Again compilation, and then they came back to do Storm of the Lightsbane. And it was a pretty problematic recording because the guys had somehow changed a little bit their view on life, going more in this satanic thing, being swallowed up by the whole Norway scene and all that. And I was not really too happy with this, because I thought they had a very unique style with songs like the Somberlane and that. But they wanted to move on, and they were going in a faster, more evil direction. And after I mixed it like 3 times, the album was ready, and that one took the world even more with Storm. And that was pretty much it. And I think I have absolutely no touring memories of Jon Nødtveit. I saw 1 gig, I think, with Dissection when we played together. And there is this book about him that I can recommend, where you will know much more about how I thought about this whole working together with Jon, and get to know a little bit more about this, the Infernali side project. And I met him the last time backstage the year before he played at Wacken. That must be 2005. And I met him also one time after we had done the Infernali, and when he went to jail. And he was always nice to me. There was never any rock star, weirdo, satanic things going on. And that was his strength as a human. He could adapt very well to certain situations, but I guess he had his own way of seeing things. And I have only good memories of Jon Nødtveit, and his music is fantastic. He was, I would not use the term genius, but he was extremely gifted as a songwriter in this genre, and probably in any genre that he would ever try, Well, Sacramentum was one of those bands that showed up in what might feel like some kind of the third wave of black metal. It all went very fast. I mean, you had the first one was all the really old bands like Venom and such, and then you had all the other bands that played black metal, 80s and early 90s, and then you had a whole wave that came a little bit later, like Dark Funeral and this and that. And I guess because of that, Sacramentum showed up to my studio, and they did the first EP. I think it was in 1994, and that turned out great. And that's when I get to know the guys a little bit. And then they came back to do the second album when I had moved the studio to Örebro in 1995. And I have very, very little memories of that recording. I was exceptionally stressed out person during that time. And at one point, I remember sitting at the headquarters from Invasion Records in Königs Wusterhausen near Berlin. And the label owner and his friend played me music in the stereo, and they were looking at me like I should have some kind of reaction. And I remember thinking, wow, what's this then? It sounds really good. The sound is great, but what can this be? And they said, hey, you don't know? You mixed this. This is Sacramentum. And I was like, what? I did this? That sounds so great. Oh, fuck, because in those days I didn't have the time to go back and listen to the albums. Once they were ready, they were ready. And that one sounds pretty good still to this day. I had the honor of remastering it. And I also got in touch with the band later to do the remix of one of the albums that I did not record or mix the first time around. And it turned out extremely well. And it was also in this kind of session, or what you want to call it, from the very beginning of, do you know anyone who can digitalize these old tapes, to getting the files, to actually getting the green light to start remixing it. And it turned out extremely well, and I got to know Nisse a little bit more in this time. We didn't really talk that much in the early days. I remember that I think somehow Hellfuck came from Nisse that I thought it was cool and I used for Infested. And they were really nice guys, very talented. And I heard it now more than then, because I was, just 24/7 with this kind of melodic black metal stuff in the 90s. And it's crazy because I met Nisse when they played with Sacramentum in Hamburg just at the end of last year. I remember it was freezing cold outside, and we took some photos and we talked about the good old times and how it was now 30 years since we did work together for the first time. And he was I would not say that he was suicidal in any way when I met him there in the tour bus, but he was severely hungover, and he cured his hangover with alcohol, and looked like he could use a break. That's but I've seen a lot of musicians on tour buses that looked like not really good versions of themselves, and it's extremely sad that he's no longer with us, and my heart goes out to his family and children and bandmates and everyone, because he was a really a nice guy and a very talented lyricist and singer. So rest in peace, Nisse. Katatonia. Well, I guess that all started when I got a fan mail from Jonas and Anders and say, yeah, hi, we are two guys from Stockholm who really love Edge of Sanity. Will you, come play a gig or whatever? And then I think they mentioned in that letter or some letter later on that they were also in a band and that they maybe could come and record in my studio. And I thought that was a cool thing, Spend some time and get some extra cash. So the guys came down from Stockholm, and we spent a weekend recording the Yeva Elohim Met demo. And I helped them a lot, some kind of producer in a little special way, trying to convince them to skip the blast beats and this and that. And that was a clever move, because I think that made Katatonia something slightly more unique, kind of a doom black that I was yet to hear at the time, which was in the summer of 1992. And they got picked up by No Fashion later on to do albums. And the demo was also released on CD then later on. So it was pretty cool. And they came back to my studio in 93 and recorded Dance of December Souls, which also turned out pretty cool and not as magical really as the demo, but it was okay. And after that one, I actually offered them to come to the studio for free, because the very final session of Dance of December Souls, we were all like, oh, we love Gothic rock so much. And I did some Gothic rock singing on Dance of December Soul with my deepest possible Andrew Eldritch voice, saying "Dance Away" or something like that. And I said, yeah, we want to go full goth, with clean vocals and this and that. So they came down and they did this one song that I honestly cannot remember the name of. Oh, Scarlet Heavens, is it? Sorry. And I kind of paid for that. They paid for their own tickets, of course, to come there and back, but I paid for the recording. And nothing came of their new sound, really, When they came back the next time, I think it was to either do For Funerals to Come or to record songs for the Wrong Again compilation. And they were changing a little bit as humans. Jonas was taking on a little bit more of a nihilistic black metal approach, and Anders was still the nice guy, and they had a bass player now also, and he didn't really say much, but he was friendly. And after that, they kind of had a falling out, and sometime in the mid-90s, Anders called me and said, yeah, Katatonia is over, but I want to do an album as Katatonia myself. Will you help me to be my, Mutt Lang, or, my producer in this sense, like someone who just kind of helped him realize his vision of Katatonia. And he mentioned that, I think Chris Isaak was mentioned for some reason. It would be more of a mellow kind of melodic thing. And I thought that's what we were doing. And then all of a sudden, I'm friends again with Anders. And we also, decided to bring Norman back, not back really, into the lineup. Norman is a guy from Uncanny that I had recorded. So I knew him, Fredrik Norman, from Avesta. And he showed up as well, and they were a trio, and they were super different from Chris Isaak. That's what I can tell you. They were going for an atonal, disharmonic, weird, repetitive, strange form of metal of some kind. And we did one shoegaze song that I think is kind of cool. Especially the live version they did later on is fantastic. And once the vocal started, it was clear that Jonas' growling was not up to snuff. So he called his best friend, and that's, of course, Mikael Åkerfeldt. And he, as any best friend would do, sat his ass on a train and came, I think, the same day or the next day, showed up and just nailed all the vocals, making it, of course, a whole million times better, because his vocal could pretty much make the phone book, if anyone remember what that is, make the phone book interesting. And and I thought for a while that was where my career with Katatonia ended, because they recorded stuff at Sunlight Studio, and I had closed my studio, so could not record with me even if they wanted to. But what happened was that they were doing an album called Tonight's Decision, and I think it was Jonas or Anders who called me, and it was decided that neither could Jonas or any of the session drummers they could find, maybe with the help of Thomas Skogsberg, play to a click, and they could not really make it even as far as to the first drum fill in the first song. Then they all kind of couldn't cut it anymore. And playing to a click track is not easy, especially not when it's analog recording and you have no possibility to either punch in or punch out on the machine, meaning that you cannot fake it. You cannot, play along and then, magically punch in and out 2 seconds that you played wrong. No, you have to wait for the actual part to be completely without drums. Then you could make a stop, and then you could do the next long chunk. And fortunately for me, Katatonia's music do have these pauses. It's not this non-stop drumming action. But they called me and said, hey, could you do it? We know you can do that to a click track, because we have worked with you and done the Diabolical Masquerade drumming after a click track, and this and that. So I put my ass on the train together with my cymbals and went to Sunlight Studios. And in one day, I recorded all the drums for Tonight's Decision. And I didn't really hear the songs. I got some demos. I listened to it a bit on the train, but I'm really a bad learner, and I thought we just have to do it in the moment, riff by riff. And for some reason, the headphones were broken somehow in Sunlight. So I had in one of my ears, I had one guitar that sounded like it came out of a wasp's nest or an Onkel Konkel recording, plus a fucking loud cowbell. And the guys screaming in the talkback microphone, oh, here's a drum fill, now come this riff. And I was just, trying to do the very best I could. And that was a very, very weird and strange, but cool experience. I think this I Am Nothing song is the best Katatonia song ever. Maybe then with the new Katatonia, they have this song called Lacquer that I think is equally good, but it's not really comparable, because from what I know, it's kind of a Jonas solo album song that turned into a Katatonia song. But anyway, for a pure Katatonia song, I Am Nothing is just, I don't know why there is no cover version or a re-recording or whatever. That song is a smash hit, guys. That was that with Katatonia. The album that I made that I would like to be remembered for, yeah, that's a hard one, because the album that I know in my heart is the one that I want to be remembered for, is an album that maybe never will be finished and released. I've been talking about this Second Sky album now since 2003, I think, and it's been recorded and mixed and nearly been considered ready for release, and then it got kind of chopped up again, and I went back, and at this point the album is being dismantled, and there are good songs, some of the best songs that I ever wrote, but the way the record industry have evolved to this, and there are no budgets anymore, and the budget I blew back in 2004 on recording drums with Peter Damin, which is one of the best drummers in the world, that recorded the drums not only once but twice for the album. But at this point there's even too many other Second Sky out there, so even the name is gone, and it's so that I know that is the album that when it would eventually be ready, and every word of lyrics, every note of music is perfect in the playing and in the production and the mixing, all that. Again, that's one of those weird things that I don't know if that album can exist. Maybe it's better off in my mind, and there I can always be, yeah, but it would be the best when it's ready, and the disappointment of it being ready and not being the best is maybe something I could not handle. So I will stick to the best stuff that I ever did, and what I would like to be remembered for is that if they want to check out metal with growling and a little bit harder stuff, they should go with The Northern Sanctuary from Witherscape. Fantastic album that I pour my heart and soul into. Worked so hard that I even destroyed my fucking throat doing it. And the one with no growls on it is the Retribution album from Nightingale, which is also something I put my heart and soul into, and I just really love every second of that album, and I'm also happy with the way it sounds, and the same for the Witherscape album. So these are really two holy grails for me, and if there's something from the past, I would say that you have good moments on any of the Edge of Sanity and the Nightingale and Pandemonium and all that Unicorn, but those two are extremely special because they became as a whole. And you say album, not song, so it means that have to be regarded as an album as a whole. And I think honestly the remix of Crimson 2, not the original version, the remix, comes really close to being also extremely perfect. Well, the plans for 2025 is to just try to do a good job mixing and mastering stuff. And now that the reissues are all done, I don't have any of that stuff, which have been such a fantastic trip. And I'm eternally grateful for Century Media, Sony, and my A&R guy, Leif Jensen. They did such an amazing job with all this stuff. And there's still, of course, reissues coming out all the way into next year. It was always interesting to see where, what happens to all that stuff. But it's back to full-time mixing and mastering, and not spending so much time with liner notes and checking and fixing with the layout and all that, but which have been great fun. And if you're in a band and you want mixing or mastering, just don't hesitate to get in touch. I work with anything from bands who do their first thing to bands that have been in the business for, 40, 50 years. There's no difference. I just go to unisound.se, and that's that. Thanks for the interview. Thanks for the interest. I hope it turns out great.